Hello and welcome to the Worn and Wound podcast. My name is Zach Kazan. I'm the managing editor of Worn and Wound. We have a full house today. It's a real Brady Bunch situation on our podcast screen with multiple countries, multiple continents represented in today's episode. Joined today by Zach Weiss, co-founder of Worn and Wound. Zach, how's it going?
Doing good. I am sadly just in New York, so I'm not.
Oh, don't be sad. It's a great place to be. It's never be sad about that. Due south of Zach, we've got Kat Shoulders from Nashville, Tennessee. How's it going, Kat?
Good. Glad to be on the pod today.
And rounding it out, our guest today, our transatlantic guest, we've got Ken from Arken. Ken, we've been trying to have you on the podcast for a really long time, and I'm glad the stars finally aligned to get you on, because we've been kind of like watch friends of yours for quite a while, and it's great to finally have you on the podcast. So welcome.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. Transatlantic guest. I like that. That's going to be my new bio, I think.
Yeah, I think that's totally appropriate. I just blew right past wrist checks, so I apologize.
How dare you?
Yeah, I feel a little out of practice here because we've got so many faces on our screen.
Threw you off.
Ken, you're our guest. Let's hear what you're wearing today.
So I'm wearing the watch that kind of made it all possible, really, because I'm a big fan of this pod. I'm a big fan of you guys and the work that you do, and yeah, so the watch I'm wearing is the Arken Instrumentum, and it's the watch that I guess made everything happen, and is the reason why I am where I am.
Yeah, the debut Arken watch, very cool. Very
the
cool.
OG,
the original. Yeah.
Kat, how about you? What are you wearing today?
I am wearing my new to me Seiko SPB 411. This is the land mechanical GMT that they just released, the reissue. I gotta say, this might be one of the coolest Seikos I've had, but props to Seiko on the bracelet for this one, because I've been a Seiko bracelet hater for many years, and this bracelet is really, really nice. If not like the nicest bracelet I've seen on a Seiko ever. It's got like these like weird flat links that are really angular on it, and a great taper, little tiny micro adjust, which is nice. And it's just a really cool watch, and vintage inspired, obviously. I think it's like a 1-for-1 like kind of case remake, and it's just perfectly sized. I think it's like 38 millimeters. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it's a really nice little GMT watch. It can't go wrong. And I think one of the best parts about it, and I was telling Zach this last week, it doesn't say prospect on the dial, because I hate that. And so there's no prospects on the dial at all, which is really nice. Just Seiko.
Very cool. Congrats on the pickup. That's a recent addition.
Yeah, recent. In just like the last 2 weeks or so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah, that's a Seiko reference. I think kind of like flew under my radar. Like I remember, I think I might have written about it. If I'm
you did.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
They really do all bleed together. But yeah, no, that's one I haven't really like given like too much thought to, because I think we kind of all live in like Seiko diver world. Zach and I,
it kind of came out. There was a little bit of buzz, and like to be honest, like visually, it's kind of boring. And I was just at my AD visiting, and he pulled it out, and he's like, "This is the last one we have," and like in hand, it's really, really nice and really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Zach, how about you? What are you wearing today?
I have on my most recent acquisition, the Habring Irwin Pilot. Which I picked up
very cool.
Ago.
Well, I think you guys both have new watches on today. Yeah, no, that Habring's awesome. You've been enjoying that so far?
I love it. And I wasn't 100% sure if I would, because it's like in some ways a very, very plain watch. It's like a very kind of it's a brushed steel case, a simple flat dial with some pad printing. There's not like a lot of like fanciness going on the top side of it, but then it's mechanically very interesting. But I also haven't had like a very like kind of straightforward field watch kind of a thing, even though they call it a pilot. I don't know, kind of mash them together. And I forgot just how much I like that. So yeah, knowing that it's like if you know kind of a watch, it's it's very enjoyable. It's very enjoyable to wear. And it's perfect for the summer too. It's like thin and light. It's great.
Have you fooled anyone with the dead seconds yet? Has anyone been like, why are you wearing a quartz watch?
It hasn't come up, but I'm excited for that when it does.
Yes.
Be like, oh, wait until you see this.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. I'm wearing my Tudor Black Bay 41 Burgundy today. Nothing special, just Tudor Black Bay. It's just a good, like, kind of like day in, day out watch. So I got it back from service like a month or so ago, and I've been wearing it pretty consistently since then. So Ken, let's get right into it.
Sure.
I feel like, I mean, we all know you and your brand pretty well. You've been on our radar obviously for a while, but for listeners who might not be familiar with Arken, I was hoping you could kind of just like take us through sort of like the idea behind the brand and sort of the origins of it, and maybe like how you yourself personally like got into watches and what led to the creation of the brand.
So I think the kind of the brand or the Arken is, the concept behind it is about kind of overbuilding a watch that can be useful to anyone in their everyday life, right? But the process, the thought process, and the like approach to design and execution is almost a lot more in terms of it being overspec'd. And like, for example, a dive watch might be 300 meters water resistant, but you're not going to dive to 300 meters, right? But then that's going to withstand a certain level of let's say brutality in daily wear, right? So it's kind of like overbuilding things for the everyday adventure, right? And being realistic about the fact that like most people just have these everyday adventures. And then that also kind of ties into it being affordable and practical, and me wanting to bring a type of watch with certain types of materials down to a price point that allow you that freedom, that allow you the ability to wear them in those environments and not really worry about it, and be able to communicate with myself to fix it if it needs to be fixed, or any advice, or kind of almost like taking a car to a garage. Do you know what I mean? Like having that ability to kind of just have that complete freedom to utilize it as a tool watch in a reality that doesn't really need tool watches anymore. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the ideation behind like Arken. How it started was basically because of COVID, really. So I started. I've been into watches for a long time. Like my dad, loved his watches. My brother, who's about 7 years older than me, he was always a big influence, and he got all the cool watches when I wasn't allowed watches when I was a little kid. He got the Casio F91, and I was like, well, I want to press it until the battery dies. Like that was the constant, like, it started to get into my psyche. And then I really got into watches probably a couple years before COVID. A few years before COVID, I started to kind of discover the world of Seiko. Then that was when like Seiko was like on my mind, and I loved that I could basically rip it apart and just build it again, and just buy other things and mix match parts from other Seikos and just keep doing it. And
did you do that from the start? Was that like a thing that you immediately sort of, because I feel like that's like once you start doing that, like it sets you on a very particular course.
Oh yeah,
probably. If like
yeah. It became kind of addicting. Like I think I have an I think a lot of probably the listeners could probably relate to this, but like watch people, or at least me, I have a very obsessive personality, I think, in that respect. Like a lot of things I become obsessed over, and the watches became one of those things. And so I got a Seiko, I started taking it apart, and then I started like buying other Seikos, taking them apart, swapping the parts around, and then it really started to pick up traction during COVID, because I used to fly around a lot for my work, and obviously I couldn't fly anymore. So I was just killing time basically. And so I was buying Seiko parts, and then I was buying vintage ones and restoring them, and I was just doing it for fun really. And then I found that the modding community that is very, very big in Seiko, and it's much bigger now. There was a very limited amount of like parts and stuff that you could buy and modify the watch. And so I looked into manufacturers to make parts that were compatible with Seiko watches, and ended up finding manufacturers that actually made parts for other brands. So then
Oh wow.
that was then kind of, I'd for many years I'd kind of longed for the idea to create my own thing, to tell my own story, to make my own product. And I just thought, well, maybe if I spend enough time and really just kind of design something for me, maybe I could make that the thing that, expresses my creativity. And and then that was kind of the step one into Arken then.
That's awesome.
And so the instrument, you mentioned like price point and how like it was important for you to create something that was like, affordable and that people could, wear without worrying about. We'll put links to everything up in the show notes, obviously, but the instrumentum was like around $500 or so, like when you launched it, which is like a lot of watch for the money. And like this watch is like has a very like unique design. I imagine it involved a lot of like custom fabrication, and like you're not using like off the shelf components for this. It's really kind of like a very like unique thing for $500.
Yeah, I think at the time, like I like titanium anyway. Like I've always been a big fan of titanium. But because I was relatively new in the watch kind of like journey, titanium at that time wasn't as accessible. Like it seems to be a lot more accessible now, and you can get it at a broad range of price points and stuff like that. But there wasn't that many, so I thought, well, if I make a full watch out of titanium and do it for like $500, which it was on the launch day, that's going to be the only one really that's there, and I get to wear that, and that's kind of the driving force. I was like, I want to make it for me. Like I want to wear it. I just so happen to have to make 300 of them so that I can have one, right? So that was kind of the plan of action, so to speak. But yeah, that was the idea.
I'm curious, just in terms of the design process, like, so you had this. You had this idea to use a material that is like more expensive than your standard material. Use it for a bracelet, a clasp, a case, like a bezel, and you wanted to hit like a certain price point. Like, did you run into challenges? Because it sounds like you had like a wish list and then like also a restriction, which is sort of like the other. They don't necessarily work together.
Yeah, I like you've probably heard from every watch like person who started a watch brand that like the naiveness has to almost be there. Like you have to go into it just head first and say, yeah, I'm going to do this, and then just accept what happens. And there was immediate challenges. Like the factories that I found originally, they all said no. They were like, no, we're not going to work with you because you're a new guy. You haven't got a track record. Titanium, we haven't fully fleshed out our capabilities, and we also definitely cannot do it at that price that you need it to be. And so I went to I think it was about 12, 13 factories, and they all said no. And then one factory was like, okay, we'll take a chance on you, but if it fails, then it's also on you. So I said, okay, let's do it. And it was that kind of idea that I was just going to figure out a way, because I'd heard that a lot of brands that started out, they'd get pushback, right? And the pushback would make you change your idea, and then that would dilute your design, and that would eventually like strip away what made it compelling in the first place. So I just wanted to stick to that and just keep, find a way basically. And so that kind of, that drove me to just keep going and going. And then even in manufacturing, it kind of just got increasingly more difficult. Like every watchmaker I worked with was kind of like, you didn't make it easy for yourself on the first run. Because it was just like making a titanium bracelet in the wake of COVID was probably the worst decision I've ever made. Like, because the delays were just incredible. And and so, and you've got delays with a consumer base that is like almost, they're betting on you. They don't know if you're gonna deliver yet because you haven't done it before. So that anxiety of thinking like, oh God, like, I need to make sure that I come through for these people. And thankfully it all worked out. But yeah, it did have its challenges in the beginning.
Yeah. And like people were looking at you pretty carefully, like during this time, because you did, like, we wrote about your watch, in like late 2021, I think when it when it debuted, and you got some media, attention, kind of like focused on sort of like the enthusiast, like tool watch, niche community, but like still, that's a lot of people kind of like looking at you. Did you feel like, was there like a lot of pressure like involved at that point?
I think there was, but like the pressure was masked by the fact that I felt really lucky because I was kind of
Yeah.
like I had this pressure and this fear that something could go wrong, but then at the same time I almost felt like, well, if I've got these eyes on me and these people like appreciating what my design and what I'm trying to do, then all I have to do is just do my best. As long as I make sure that I'm transparent and I make sure that the customers and the owners are happy and I stay true to like what it is that I want out of it, then it's okay. So I kind of just was more thankful than anything else, and that made it easier to swallow the pressure pill. So yeah.
Kat, you're an Instrumentum owner, if I'm not mistaken, right? So tell us about your experience with that watch and what kind of drew you to it initially.
Well, kind of like how me and Ken were connected early on was Ken reached out back in the 10 and 2 days and was just like, hey, I really would love to hop on a phone call and get your opinion on this watch that I'm working on. And all at the time that I saw like on your Instagram page was like all this great photography. It was like outdoor photography and some animals and stuff. And I was just like, immediately, I don't even know what the watch looks like, but I'm sold. Like, this is really great. And you hopped on the phone, then I saw the images of the watch, and maybe traditionally isn't something that maybe a lot of women flock to, but I think that like the size and even things like the taper and things like that, I was immediately attracted to. And obviously I'm a huge sports watch fan, big Seiko lover too, and I could see a lot of elements from a lot of different things that I really love in this watch. And I have always been a fan, and will continue to be, just because I think like what you're doing is really cool, and I think what you're offering in the world of independent and sort of micro brand space is really awesome and unique. And I have a lot of respect for any brand that sort of has, their own DNA. Like you look at, you don't have a huge catalog yet, but I can imagine one day when you do, like they all sort of have this uniqueness, and like you can look at a watch and be like, that's definitely an Arken. Like that looks like an Arken. And I really like brands that kind of have that DNA in their collection. And so that's immediately what drew me. But the photography is what got me at first, I guess. Because I was like, this guy is really good and pays attention, obviously, to detail. And you can tell that in the watch that you built. And I have mine boxed up because it's about to go back to you. But I love the watch, and I love what you're doing with your brand. And obviously, I'm really excited to see where you go in the future, too.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. I'm glad that like it's got wrist time and you enjoyed. And I remember that call that we had like way back then, because I was trying to understand like perspective, because when you're designing something and your head's down and you're just kind of like going at it, you don't really sometimes realize like what everybody else is thinking, and you can kind of convince yourself of things that are not real, but I really appreciate that, and it helped a lot to kind of shape where I wanted to position like a lot of my messaging and stuff.
It's a tank of a watch, and I wear it and have worn it during our setups at wind up when I know I'm going to be banging around, and that thing, it still looks brand new. There's like the scratch on it. It's like incredible. But I love having a watch like that feels like I can just really do anything with it. Which is why my collection is mostly, I would say, sport watches. I can sort of handle the toughness of my, I don't know, desk and wear really for the most part.
Your everyday adventures.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
AKA door handles. Just kidding.
Yeah.
So many door handles.
It is door handles.
Yeah. So the Instrumentum, I think, is like it's a hit. Like it sells out, if I'm not mistaken. Like that's very popular piece. And then you follow that up a few years later with the Alterum, which I think in every way feels like a more ambitious watch. Just kind of like as an observer, like it's what you're trying to do here with a mechanical complication is like not something that I've ever really encountered in a watch like this before. So this is a watch that it's a dual time watch using a Miyota movement, but not the Flyer Miyota GMT that's now like pretty commonly available. Can you like walk us through this piece, because I think it's pretty unique and pretty interesting.
So the Alterum uses the exact same movement that's in the Instrumentum, which is the 9015. But then we added a module essentially on top of the movement to allow a second hand stack. And then that hand stack have a gear train that can lock and release it from the main hour hand, so that you basically just have 2 hour hands, and use that as a dual time function. And then adding into the wheels was a kind of AM PM indicator for either of the hour hands, so you could tell which one was day and which one was night. But you're right in saying that it was ambitious in that I also kind of just went into it not really knowing whether it was going to work or not, which seems to be like a running thing now. But I'd learned so much from the Instrumentum, and, going into it, not having ever, assembled, created a watch that had been mass produced before and making it out of titanium and all these things. I wanted to just implement those learnings, but at the same time also keep pushing what I felt was capable at the price point that we kind of operate at, and I didn't want to like stop with that, because I feel like that's a kind of not a cornerstone, but it's very reflective of like what I want to give to the community. Like I want to try and, keep pushing what is available, so that, regardless of whether you're new in the space or you've been in the space a long time, if you've got that X amount of cash to spare, that you can enjoy it at that price point, as opposed to like have to be like, oh, I need to save up another 1,000 to enjoy this one thing at that tier. And so it's that was the kind of, what I wanted to achieve with it. But the movement modification itself seems more complicated in that, you don't really see module modifications done at the price. But in kind of the reality of the mechanics, it just took, I had to simplify it so that less things would go wrong. Right. And that hour hand basically lock and release thing is what made it a viable concept. And it just so happened that the company that I worked with to do it was hit the nail on the head first time, thank God, because that would have cost way too much.
Yeah. So what was it like tell me about the process of like, getting this like from like an idea in your head to like a watch, that people can actually like buy. Like, because this is, I keep coming back to this like idea of like ambition and like wanting to like push the brand and push that idea that you're working with. Like this seems like something that brands that have been around a lot longer and have, probably a lot more resources like are not doing. So like how did it get into your head that you could even like attempt something like that?
There's a lot of naivety, but I also hit a bit of luck, right? And the luck came with, I was looking for a manufacturer to help me redecorate a movement, right? Because I had an idea for another watch, which I was prototyping, which I kind of hit a wall with, so I put it on the back burner. But I was looking for a company to basically refinish like a movement, but not like refinish it, just like add an engraving here and there, but like essentially rejig it. And so like I found a company that did a lot of redecorating. Like essentially you could take, I don't know, any movement and like make the whole bridge out of gold if you wanted to make that bridge out of gold, right? And because they had the capabilities of this like micro mechanics and the machining, they had the ability to kind of mass produce, small gear trains and like module plates and these sorts of things. And they had already started to experiment with some things that were maybe a little bit more straightforward, things like jump hour mods and these sorts of things like that have, try and keeping it as simple as possible to not mess with the longevity of the base movement. And so I said to them, how difficult would it be to add another hour hand to it, and they said we can try, but again, if it messes up, it's on you. And so I was like, well, okay, let's try, right? Like I've got this is what this is what excites me. This is what I want to see at the end of it. And so that concept kind of then grew to being like, well, okay, if we're gonna have an hour hand, unless it's just going to be permanently stuck to the main hour hand like a slave hand, then we've got to find a way to release it. Let's move the date around. If we move the date around, then we've got some real estate. Okay, we should maybe add the AM and PM depending on the amount of rotations, and it just kind of like grew from one thing to the next. And then it just was a case of, okay, let's just take a shot at it now, and then trial and error. It's the same with making like dials or hands, right? Like I'll draw out like a technical drawing for a dial and say, okay, like I want the loom to be this high, blah blah blah. And then when it comes out, I'm like, oh yeah, do you know what? We need a bit more clearance with that. So we go back, and that's kind of like what happened with the module. But obviously with the module, it doesn't have to be aesthetic. It just has to work, right? And so like it's a less stressful in a way, because sometimes the aesthetic stuff, like I get really like, I'm like, no, that needs to move just like a fraction of a mil over, because it's going to bother me. And yeah, so that's how it kind of progressed from one to another. But I didn't think it was going to work out the way that it did, and I also didn't think that Miyota and Seiko were going to release a third-party movement in the time that it took me to do it. Like, Jesus, that would have made my life so much easier. But then at the same time, it wouldn't have made the same story. So it's I appreciate now that that was almost like the selection pressure to force us to grow in that direction. So yeah.
I can remember like when you announced the Ultram and learning about it, and like reading about the movement and thinking like the new Miyota movement exists. Like what's going on here?
Yeah.
Why did he do it in such a weird way? But like you're right, like it is cooler, I think, to like have that story of like kind of like doing this like kind of ingenious like hack, like on the movement to get the desired effect. I think that's a very cool thing.
It's quite, because that's like modifying, right? And it's quite common in the Seiko world. You just kind of like, I remember there was like, say if you're modding a Seiko, right? You look for specific bezel diameters to be like, oh yeah, it's going to work on this watch, and you scour the internet for like compatible bezel inserts for this specific thing, and like you buy, oh, there's an aftermarket Rolex bezel insert, but it's cheap, and I could maybe file off that, and it's just like my brain kind of works in that problem solving way that it lends itself quite nicely to very risk heavy projects like this. So yeah, I do enjoy it. I think I can say that because it's worked out. But yeah, it's quite thankful now.
So I mean, this watch has also gotten like a really like warm reception. I think I really enjoy seeing folks in my Instagram feed like posting theirs, and there's like a bunch of different variants. It seems like you've had some fun kind of like with like loom on certain variants of the Alterum, and it's just a very, very cool piece. I'm wondering what the at like 2 watches in, like what the response from the community kind of like means to you at this point, and if you are like still kind of like taking feedback from the community and how that impacts sort of like where the brand goes from here.
I'm really thankful for the watch community. The watch community is like, so far from kind of everyone that's spoken to me, they've been really like involved and kind of personal in a good way. Like I think because a lot of the people that follow Arken, they know that it is just me. They kind of communicate to me not like, oh, customer service agent, right? They're kind of like, oh, hey, Ken, blah, blah, blah. Here, they have a question. And that's made the community element of it like really rewarding and really fruitful in terms of both feedback and like moving forward with my designs. And also it's meant that the people that do follow Arken, they're quite trusting in that, like, they've kind of just like, oh, we like that your process. So whatever your design is going to be, it's going to be kind of representative of you. So they kind of just leave me to it,
Mhm.
which is quite nice, because then I feel the freedom to be able to just design what I want to design and design things that I want to
Yeah.
wear, because at the end of the day, it's kind of all going to fit within the same, box.
Yeah.
And the response for the Ultram has been like more than I could have, possibly hoped for. I mean, I wasn't expecting to do as well as I did with the first watch, but then the second watch got received, I think, really well, because there was almost like an acceptance now, like, oh, he's here, he's going to be here now. The brand's going to exist now. It's not just like, oh, it's a campaign and then it's done. And that's meant a lot. And so I've got loads of designs in that, and kind of in my head, that I want to do, and keep the Ultram now as like a consistent product in the catalog, and just evolve that, and try and just keep creating authentically, I guess. So.
Yeah. Can I ask, what is the biggest piece of feedback you feel like you get from your customers or people that are fans of the brand?
Positive or negative?
Both. Both. Yeah.
Positive is probably this feels way more expensive than it is.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
which is
That's nice
really
to
really
hear, I
nice
would
to
imagine.
hear. Negative, why can't you make more and make them faster? That's probably
It's also
yeah.
fair.
Which is, it's realistic. That's probably But even then, it's not like super negative, because it kind of comes from like a valid place. Like,
Yeah.
I wish that I had
Totally.
the cash flow to be able to just be like, yeah, I want to order 10,000 units and just have them all in. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of limited by that. But maybe one day, and then there'll be different negatives then. But we'll handle them when they come. But right now, I'm quite happy with it, because people are, again, maybe people pull their punches, because they are seeing me behind it, so they're not communicating to like a faceless entity where they can be like, oh, this brand sucks, right? They're just like, hey Ken, could you do this? So I'm like, oh yeah, we can maybe work this out. So it's better if it's a lot better.
Here's the thing about the internet, though, Ken, is that people don't care if they can see your.
That's true. That's true.
If they really dislike something, like they will let you know. I think people genuinely enjoy the watches and enjoy you. That's sort of the sense that I get from the community. Do you see yourself like scaling up at some point, though? Like, is that part of the goal for the brand, is to be able to like always have like a watch in stock that you can like buy on the website?
Yeah, 100%. Like, kind of in the beginning, as like a project, I wasn't, I just thought that was going to be it. And then, I didn't think I could essentially start a company with it. And now it's starting to kind of like, okay, I'm putting things in place to kind of try and plan and set up a foundation. So the plan to grow and scale is definitely there, but I also don't want to grow too quickly. Like, I want to, to quote like Jack Carr, like, steady is smooth and smooth is fast, right? Like, I've got to kind of just take my time and make sure that like the foundations are in place, because if the demand's super super high one day and then the demand goes away, then I don't want to be kind of in this position where like customers and owners are unhappy, or people I've hired are going anywhere, or this sort of thing. Because in the reality of business, you just have to be prepared for kind of all weathers. So I'm quite just taking my time, being very responsible, so I can be irresponsible in my designs, right? So like, so I'm trying to balance it out and just take my time and grow accordingly. But yeah, I'd love to have a showrooms and places for people to go and try them on, because I think that makes a big difference, because my watches look bigger than they are. Like, they look bigger in photos than they are, because I have a smaller wrist, so I designed them for my wrist. And so people are like, this is a 40 millimeter watch. It doesn't wear like a 40 mil. And I'm like, well, looks can be deceiving. So I want to hopefully have kind of places for people to try them on and that sort of thing. So that's all in the plan, I guess.
Having achieved like success with the Ultram, and did I say that right? Yeah, Ultram. Yeah. Do you feel now obligated to continue to pursue modules and complications and modifications as well?
There is a bit of that pressure. Yeah, there is a bit of that pressure. I think but I also want them to come naturally, right? Because I'd come up with some ideas, and I'd already tested some ideas that didn't quite really work since then. So I've also got to kind of be a little bit more realistic about what is possible. But I think the big hurdle, not that it's going to be the next watch, because the next watch I've already kind of got in prototyping already, which is there is a modification to it, but it's not like a heavy modification. It's more like a display configuration. Whereas the one after that, if there's if there's like a movement that isn't in the market that I feel fits within what I want to create, then then I'll go down that path then and try and figure out like, okay, is this a viable way to execute that? Because it also has to make sense, like financially, right? Like the GMT one was perfect because there wasn't anything for me to use, so it was like, well, this is it. This is the only option. So yeah. But there is a pressure, to answer that back to the question. There is a pressure, yeah.
And are there any servicing concerns when you're making your own components?
So the good thing about the Ultium is that the module is kind of just a display module, in that like it's not really doing the heavy lifting. So a lot of the parts that we'll wear will be from the movement itself more than the actual the module. So the movements, you can actually just like swap the Miota movements in and out and just reattach it to the module and stuff. Cool. So it's separated.
So it's modular in a true
sense.
Yeah.
It's separate. Like it's screwed in and everything, but it's separated in that, like, if you took it to a watchmaker, they'd look at it and be like, oh, okay, I can see how this was put together. And so the servicing of that sort of thing is quite good. And then if there is a module issue, because the module isn't that big, it's not that expensive to replace either. So, and we're constantly making them now. That's why I think this one was important to be a staple in the catalog, so that I am constantly producing it, so that I can continue to produce the movements. And so that there'll be plenty of them for replacement, like further down the line. I don't plan to change that really. So yeah.
It's awesome.
It's cool. It's good to hear you've thought about these things.
Oh yeah.
Because it's important to have a plan. Yeah, not every brand does.
I think it's, developing complications. I remember when I met with you, I guess at Geneva 2 years ago, and you had like the prototype for that. Like, you were one of the first brands that we had seen that it was developing their own complications, and now we've seen a small handful, but it's still like it's like a totally new thing. That 5 years ago there was no brands doing this, and I think it's the single most exciting thing that kind of is happening, because it means that the industry's grown to a certain point where you can do this, right? You can find the manufacturer who will work with you and make gears. Like, I don't think that was just like an option before. Yeah. But there's risk. There's a huge amount of risk, right? I think there's you talk to collectors and they're like, yeah, I could buy whatever in-house movement, but if I bought the watch with the ETA 2024, I know I can service it anywhere. And there's like that kind of logic. There's a certain risk adverse customer out there too. So yeah, it's exciting, but it's daring as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really exciting to see other brands do it, and I've said this like on record before, that if brands wanted to talk to me about how they could do it, then I'm open to sharing that, because like I think it just makes the space more fun. Like, it makes the space fun, it makes it exciting, and it makes like the options, it prevents the options from becoming stale that operate at the price points and stuff. Because at the enthusiast level that we're at, it's not so much competition as it is like the customer that's buying my watch buys it for a very different reason than they're buying, let's say a Laurier or a Brew, right? Like you could have one of each in a collection, because they represent and have different aesthetics. So if they all used, the same complication, but that same complication was a mod, then it's still going to look very different, right? Like, the execution is still going to look different, and it just makes the space exciting and more fruitful. And so I like that people are doing more modifications now, but the longevity thing is quite scary. So I just got to try and keep that bit as simple as possible and not get too ahead of myself. But I'm going to put like all these grand comps, and there's going to be, a chiming mechanism and this and this and that, and throw them all on, because, then it gets a bit crazy too quick.
don't go to the tourbillon quite yet.
Oh no, definitely not.
No.
That would look kind of badass though in your
Just a tourbillon,
Yeah.
case. Yeah, it's like utilitarian watch with like this beautiful tourbillon would be really cool.
I want an Arken chiming watch. I think that sounds
An
great.
Arken
That's
chiming
probably,
watch.
what, like 3-4 years off probably at this
Arken,
pace?
I don't even know what
Seems
that would
reasonable.
look like. But the thing that would stress me out is what it would have to sound like, right? Like what would the chime be? Like I'd have to put out like a customer thing. It'd be like, what would an Arken chime sound like?
Yeah.
Well, that's where you can really innovate because all the chimes kind of sound alike, and you could think of something completely completely unique and completely different. Yeah,
that would be funny.
Yeah, I have some loads of really funny sounds bites in my head that are probably not appropriate for a podcast, but they're going. Yeah.
Well, Ken, I want to ask you real quick about like your you sent me a hat like probably, I don't know, it was like maybe last year at some point. And I don't know if you were like kind of dipping your toes into apparel a little bit. I know we were talking back and forth about materials. Is that an avenue you want to take, is like some material and testing and apparel with your brand at some point?
Yeah. So what tends to happen is that like in these moments of delay, right, I get really itchy.
You have to do something.
Yeah, like I start to get creatively itchy. So I start to like think, oh, what am I going to make now? And like I've always been a big fan of like apparel and kind of gear and technical materials and that sort of stuff. So I did the hat. We've got teas coming. We've got some other things coming because the bigger the delay, the more things that will come, right? So it's like I'm just working. I'm constantly just thinking of ideas of things. But I designed kind of the Arken brand aesthetic to hopefully be quite transferable. So I want to eventually do more things. But the core product, the bread and butter is and always will be watches, but I want it to represent also like a community of people that kind of embody that the mantra of like going out and adventuring and doing the things you want to do and like finding your way and making things happen for yourself and that sort of thing. So the apparel, the gear, whatever it might be, accessories, the sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned. If I can think of it, then I'll take a swing at it.
What kinds of gear and accessories are interesting to you? Like, what would like putting apparel aside and watches aside, like what sort of like EDC or like gear type item like would Arken make? Like, what would be your first entry into that, hypothetically?
If the UK wasn't as strict as it is, pocket knives would be one. Yeah. Pocket knives would definitely be one. Yeah. But with the laws that are here, it makes it a little bit difficult or a little bit complicated for the shipping and all this sorts of stuff. So I'd have to really get some more advice on how I'd go about doing that. But I mean, apparel, other things that coincide with watches, types of straps, types of wrist compasses. I was getting really into wrist compasses for a hot minute.
I've been down that.
Yeah. I bought them from the shout out to the wind up shop. I bought them.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was something I was just like, I have to find them for the store. I don't know if they're gonna sell. I have to find them, and we got them, and like they've been a staple. Product.
They do really well. I've had to work the wind up shop booth at several wind up shows, and I'm always surprised at how many people pick up those little compasses to stick on their their NATO straps. And it's not something that's for me, I'll say, but it's cool to see like a collective group of people just be like, that's really cool, and they want to put it on right away. Because it is a cool, like little neat, tiny accessory that you like make it your own in a way.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird. Like I like that like little bit of weirdness in it, because my brand aesthetic and my watches are quite stoic and they're quite like neutral, and my fashion sense is also quite plain and stays within a select 3 colors. So then other things I like to just be like,
wait, what's the third color? Black, white, and what?
Navy.
Oh, I like navy. Is a good one.
And then you can mix them. So like I'm okay with a bit of a gray blue or just gray. Yeah. But generally it's those 3. Yeah.
Very cool.
What a compass is really. useful for. I have a compass that I don't use to like, navigate anywhere, but it's great to determine if a watch is magnetized.
Yes. Yeah.
If a
very good.
compass
Yeah.
reacts to
Yeah.
a watch, if your watch is running funny, you want to check real quick to see if it's magnetized before, like, if you're me and your demagnetizer tool is like in the back of a drawer or a cabinet somewhere and you can't find it, let's just put it on the compass and see if it reacts and save yourself some time. Yeah. Sorry, Zach, I cut you off.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. So the watchmaker Paul Gerber, he had made a strap-mounted moon phase. That was a quartz moon phase, and it's just like that is look. There's opportunity. There's still
That's
opportunity
cool.
for things that can go outside of the watch. I just love the idea of like complication off the watch.
So I had an idea. Cool. I don't know whether this is suitable to say on the pod because I might be giving someone $1 million idea here.
No.
But yeah, this is a while ago. It's probably a lot more achievable now than it was when I thought about it. Because I actually thought about it when I was designing the instrumentum. But the tracking ability that you get on a smartwatch belongs on a bracelet, man. It does. Yeah. It belongs on a clasp. It belongs on the inside of a clasp. That's an idea that could just be done and be universalized. Yeah. And smartwatches are just, it's a perfect hybrid. But the technology has to slim down like a lot more. So that you can just wear your regular watch.
But they have those rings now.
They do.
I was just looking into this because I was like, I have like the Apple Watch Ultra, which is freaking huge. And I'm like, this is starting to get problematic at night.
You didn't have to get the Ultra.
No, I didn't have to get it, but it was the coolest looking Apple Watch. So
it's also like the
I gotta
titanium
get this
one, right? So you got it.
Yeah, it's the titanium, and it was just like the coolest one. But like I bang my head against it like at night sometimes. Like it's so big. So I've been looking into like alternative options, and there's like Oura Ring, and there's like a couple others, but it's so tiny. Like there's just tiny microchips in this ring, and it tracks your steps and your heart rate and all this stuff. But it would be so cool if that technology was in a clasp that was like right here that could also take all of those measurements throughout the day. I was just thinking, like, we have the little compass. You could do like a very, very, very tiny little quartz, just like another clock.
Oh, like a UTC could, like, module thing.
Yeah, and it would just be another time zone that you could like throw on sometimes when you're traveling on your watch when you needed it.
Like Breitling does that. Breitling has watches like that.
Yeah.
Little watch for your watch.
Yeah.
And Seiko had that crazy watch. I can't remember what it's called. It was like
the double
two square modules.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Super cool watch. Yeah, we're onto something, guys.
Yeah, I think that. We have to talk
about
no
one listens to this podcast and steal.
No one listens to this. It's not like thousands of people tune in every week.
When I went to the Science Museum in the UK on that trip to London last year, we went to the watch exhibit where Mr. Watchmaster worked and now a contributor for us. They had step counters, mechanical step counters from like the 1800s. So yeah, no, seriously, they this is an old technology to do mechanically. I don't know exactly how it works.
I wonder what they used it for.
They're crazy looking little things.
Oh.
But like, I mean, it's a high end contraption for wealthy people, but it can be made mechanically. And I was just hearing that they were there. I was like, oh my God, like that is.
Did you say this was the 1800s?
Something like that. I mean,
to be rich,
the aim wrong, but it was. I mean, it's in the museum.
Your steps in the 1800s.
It's along the. It's adjacent to. The Harrison clocks and Breguets and such. So
yeah,
we'll ask Andrew Cantor, the Mr. Watchmaster, to research that. That could be the next piece. The early mechanical pedometers. I just count my steps in my head all day. That's really exhausting, but I just count them as I go, old-fashioned way. Yeah. Ken, this has been it's been a lot of fun to catch up. Before we go, I just wanted to give you a chance to let folks know where can they find you online. Where should they? What account should they follow?
And you have a podcast now too, right, Ken?
Oh yeah.
What's
the podcast?
Yeah. So I go to a lot of the red bars here in the UK just to try other people's watches on, right? Be a bit of a fiend and just to go around the table and be like, what's here? And I made a couple friends at Bristol. Red Bar, and we kind of became good friends, and we chatted a lot about gear and watches, and the idea came up to to talk about gear and that sort of stuff on a podcast. So that's called Form and Function podcast, which is, you can check that out. We've done we're relatively new. I think there's only 40, I want to say 45 maybe episodes. I can't take the credit on that. James is the guy who does a lot of the heavy lifting, the editing, the producing, all that sort of stuff. So I just turn up and basically
It's always the best.
I
job.
basically just turn up and make inappropriate comments as he tries to keep things all spick and spam, as we call it. But yeah, so you can listen to that. That's mostly about gear. There's a lot of watch talk and stuff. Both the guys are huge fans of this podcast, so it's
it's great.
We comment about the episodes you make. We comment about a lot of the content that comes out because we're all big fans. So,
well, Ken, it's been really great. Like I said, to catch up on a podcast finally after literally years of talking about getting you on the podcast. And congratulations on the success of your first 2 watches. And and we're really looking forward to seeing what comes next. It's really exciting.
Thank you so much for having me on, guys. It's been a long time coming, but I've been really thankful and really appreciative, and I look forward to hanging out with you guys in the future.
In Geneva,
absolutely.
at our joint.
Yeah.
Wait, what's the name of the place? To remember?
Don't say it because we don't want people to.
We don't want people to go. Okay, so it's a super top secret.
Yeah, no, that's under the radar.
Say, one thing not to ruin for us.
Gotta keep some things.
It's so hard to find food that keep that one.
That's a special place. The food is really good.
If you want to go there, you got to be
our
friends with us. We'll go there
our annual dinner.
Yeah,
it's like Fight Club. You like it?
Yeah, exactly. All right, thanks, guys. It was great to chat with all of you, and thank you all for listening. We will see you next time on the next episode of the Warner Wound Podcast.